At 4:01 p.m. on January 26, 1972, a thunderous blast tore through the quiet winter sky above Czechoslovakia. A commercial airplane flight, JAT 367, broke apart mid-air, scattering metal, luggage, and human lives into the freezing wind. Among the debris, a single section of the fuselage plummeted violently toward a forest blanketed in snow. Inside it, still strapped to her seat, was a 22-year-old flight attendant named Vesna Vulović. The altitude of the fall, 33,000 feet, higher than Mount Everest. A height no human had ever survived. A height no human should survive. Witnesses on the ground later described the sound as a distant explosion followed by a strange, rolling thunder. When rescue teams reached the crash site, they expected only silence because nothing alive could come out of a breakup at cruising altitude. And yet, buried under twisted metal and shattered seats, they heard a faint, rhythmic sound. A breath, a heartbeat, a whisper of life in a place built for death. This moment would soon become one of the most baffling survival stories in modern history. Doctors would call it impossible. Investigators would argue for decades. Guinness World Records would certify it, and still people would struggle to believe it. How does a human being fall from the edge of the atmosphere and live? Before she became a global symbol of survival, Vesna was not a legend or a mystery. She was simply a young woman from Belgrade who wanted to travel, to see the world, and to escape the gravity of everyday life. She had joined the airline only months before the disaster. She had dreams, friends, and plans for the future, none of which included becoming the sole survivor of a tragedy that would echo for generations. This story is not only about the fall, it is about physics, fate, cold air, fractured metal, and the strange chain of events that aligned in an almost supernatural way. It is about a girl who boarded what should have been a routine flight, unaware that she was walking straight into one of the greatest anomalies in aviation history. The question is not only how she survived, but why she survived when no one else did, and what her survival reveals about the delicate boundary between life and death. So here's the challenge for you watching. If you fell from 33,000 feet, what factor do you think would give you even the smallest chance of survival? The structure of the aircraft? The terrain? Your physical condition? Or sheer luck? Because in Vesna's case, the answer is far more complex and far more unbelievable. Before the world knew her name, before she became a symbol of survival that defied every law of physics, Vesna Vulović was simply a young woman chasing freedom. Born in Belgrade in 1950, she grew up in a modest Serbian household filled with music, long conversations, and dreams that stretched far beyond the borders of Yugoslavia. From an early age, she felt a pull toward the sky. She loved airplanes, airports, the energy of people moving from one country to another. She often said that airports felt like doors to the world. But Vesna didn't become a flight attendant to seek danger. She did it to escape routine. She was curious, adventurous, and fascinated by stories from other cultures. Her friends described her as warm, energetic, and always ready to help someone. She never imagined that this generosity, this open-hearted nature, would one day shape her destiny in ways she could never predict. Ironically, she nearly didn't make it onto the flight that changed her life. It wasn't supposed to be her shift. A scheduling mistake had placed her name on the crew list for JAT Flight 360. When she saw it, she hesitated. She knew she wasn't assigned to that route. But she didn't want to cause trouble or complain, so she accepted the change. This small decision, made out of politeness, placed her on the path to the greatest fall in human history. Colleagues remember Vesna as someone who was always smiling, always easing tension with a joke or a kind word. She loved her job, loved meeting passengers, loved the sense of purpose that came with representing her airline. She had no idea that in just a few months, the job she cherished would turn into a fight for survival, and her name would be etched into records no one wants to break. At 22, Vesna carried the optimism of youth. She wasn't thinking about mortality or danger. Civil aviation felt safe. She trusted the aircraft she worked in. She trusted the system around her. Nothing in her life hinted at the unimaginable event waiting for her on that cold January day. And yet, when investigators later studied the crash, they found themselves returning again and again to one puzzling constant. Out of everyone on board, Vesna was the least physically prepared to survive. She was small, slender, with no military training, no special survival skills, no prior medical experience. In every measurable sense, she should not have lived through what happened. But survival stories are not governed by statistics. They are shaped by strange coincidences, random luck, hidden strengths, and decisions too small to notice at the time. If Vesna hadn't accepted that shift, if her colleague hadn't switched schedules, if she had spoken up, even once, she would never have boarded that flight, and history would have taken a very different path. Who was Vesna Vulović? She was not a superhero, not a trained survivor. She was a young woman with dreams, hopes, simple goals, and an open heart. And yet, she would soon become the face of one of the most unbelievable survival miracles ever recorded. On January 26, 1972, JAT Flight 367 took off from Copenhagen Airport on what should have been an entirely routine journey. The aircraft, a McDonnell Douglas DC-9, was scheduled to make a short stop in Zagreb before continuing toward Belgrade. Nothing about the flight seemed unusual. No storms, no mechanical concerns, no warning signs. To the crew, it was just another day in the air. Inside the cabin, Vesna Vulović moved gracefully down the aisle, checking passengers with her typical warm smile. There were 28 people on board, business travelers, tourists, families returning home. Many were reading newspapers, adjusting their coats, or gazing out through the oval windows at the blanket of winter clouds below them. It was quiet, calm, almost peaceful. The rest of the crew settled into their own rhythms. The captain and first officer followed standard procedures in the cockpit, monitoring instruments and maintaining communication with air traffic control. Everything was textbook. Even the flight log later recovered from the wreckage showed no distress calls. No anomalies, no signs of anything out of the ordinary. As the plane climbed to cruising altitude, a soft hum filled the cabin, the gentle vibration of engines that passengers often associate with safety. Vesna served drinks, exchanged small talk, and reassured a nervous traveler who disliked turbulence. She had done this 100 times before. Nothing felt different. But beneath the surface of this calm routine, tension was silently building in scene, unfelt and growing by the minute. No one on board knew that earlier that day, in a different city, a piece of luggage had been checked in by someone who never intended to claim it. No one knew that inside that luggage was a device that would forever rewrite aviation history. And on JAT Flight 367, no one, neither the pilots, nor the crew, nor the passengers, had the slightest suspicion that something catastrophic was hidden only a few feet away from them. As the DC-9 crossed over Czechoslovakia, daylight began to fade, painting the clouds in shades of orange and gray. Passengers settled deeper into their seats. The cabin lights dimmed. Vesna secured a service cart and prepared for landing procedures that were still an hour away. She felt relaxed, comfortable, confident in the routine she knew so well. Then the first hint of unease crept in, subtle and brief. A low vibration, so small it could have been turbulence. A slight shift in air pressure, something only a trained crew member might notice. Vesna paused for a second. Was that just the aircraft adjusting, or was it something else? Before she could answer the question even in her own mind, everything went silent again. Too silent. Moments later, the DC-9 continued its flight as if nothing had happened. Passengers chatted softly. A child dozed off on his mother's shoulder. The pilots kept the plane steady on its path towards Zagreb. But fate had already taken its position. They were now minutes away from an event that no one could sense, no one could predict, and no one could survive except one. In the final stretch of that quiet evening, JAT Flight 367 remained a picture of calm, suspended between normalcy and disaster. A fragile moment of peace balanced on the edge of the unimaginable. And in that narrow window, just before the sky tore apart, the world aboard the DC-29 continued as if tomorrow was guaranteed. January 26, 1972, 4:01 p.m., over Czechoslovakia. The DC-9 sliced through the winter sky at nearly 33,000 feet, its engines humming with steady confidence. Inside the cabin, passengers settled into the quiet monotony of flight. Vesna Vulović was securing a service cart, preparing for the descent that was still far ahead. Nothing in the air hinted at danger. No alarms, no turbulence, nothing. And then, without warning, the sky detonated. A violent flash tore through the fuselage. Metal screamed. The cabin decompressed instantly, as if the air itself had been sucked out of existence. One moment, the aircraft was whole. The next, it was splitting apart like a tin can crushed by an invisible fist. Seats, luggage, panels, fragments, everything was ripped away in a brutally fast cascade. Passengers were thrown against ceilings, walls, or straight into the open sky. The force was so immense that most never had time to process what was happening. It was instantaneous, a blinding burst, a deafening roar. The DC-9 broke into pieces in midair, scattering across the cold European sky. At that altitude, the temperature was well below freezing. Winds were savagely strong, and yet, in the middle of this airborne chaos, Vesna, the flight attendant, whose life should have ended, instantly remained, trapped inside a section of the cabin, pinned between a food cart and the fuselage. That small, crushing detail would later become the reason she lived. Less hypotheses, initially Slonquake. Sue's confusion in the hours following the disaster, chaos reigned on the ground. Emergency teams rushed toward reports of falling wreckage. Local villagers described a long, echoing boom overhead. Some even said they saw the plane burst like a firework. Early theories emerged quickly. Mechanical failure, an engine explosion, perhaps structural fatigue, an older aircraft giving out mid-flight, pilot error, though no distress call supported this. A mid-air collision radar showed no such contact. But almost immediately, investigators noticed something chilling. The DC-29 hadn't simply fallen apart. It had been torn open from within. Scorch marks, debris patterns, a blast that projected outward, all of it pointed toward one explanation, an onboard explosion. Authorities began digging into passenger luggage, searching logs, cross-checking names, and slowly, a darker context emerged, a context tied to one of the most politically tense eras in European history. Uncontext historic explosive in the early 1970s, Europe was a hotbed of tension. Czechoslovakia had recently undergone the Prague Spring and its violent suppression. Several extremist groups were active across the continent, many using bombings as a form of political pressure. Yugoslav Airlines, in particular, had already been targeted before. Separatist groups seeking political independence had attacked government-linked entities, including airlines, postal systems, and embassies. Investigators immediately suspected one of the most active, extremist factions operating against the Yugoslav state at the time. According to official reports later published by Czechoslovak authorities, the pattern matched previous attacks almost perfectly. A bomb hidden inside a checked suitcase, placed exactly where it would inflict maximum structural damage. No warning, no negotiation, just a timed detonation designed to kill everyone on board. And it nearly did. As the wreckage rained down over the snow-covered hills of Asarbiske Kamenis, emergency responders expected only one thing: to recover Botnias. No one imagined that a single human being could fall from 33,000 feet and survived. But beneath the broken trees, wrapped in mangled metal, someone was still breathing. Someone who should have died the moment the sky exploded. When the explosion tore the aircraft apart, the cabin disintegrated into dozens of pieces scattered across the night sky. Some debris fluttered softly like paper. Others plummeted like steel stones. But one piece, just one, held a human being still strapped into her seat. A rear fuselage section containing Vesna pinned inside by a mule cart. The very object that had nearly crushed her in the explosion had now become her anchor, preventing her from being ejected into open air, like almost everyone else. This fragment did not tumble freely. It spun, it twisted, but its mass and shape gave it a specific kind of aerodynamic, chaotic, yet partially stabilizing, enough to slow the fall comparison to a human body. Still, they were falling at lethal speed. 33,000 feet of free fall, as the fuselage section plummeted through the winter air. Vesna's body, likely unconscious at this stage, did not tense or struggle. Ironically, this state would later be considered one of the factors that saved her life. Doctors would explain, an unconscious body doesn't resist impact. It bends instead of breaking. Meanwhile, outside the metal shell, the world transformed from serene sky to a deadly descent. Temperatures below -50 degrees Celsius, air so thin it could barely sustain consciousness. Winds whipping at the falling debris, the ground rising faster than any human could process in those moments. Vesna was suspended between life and death, her fate tethered to physics she didn't choose. Physics of a survival that should be impossible. Experts analyzing the crash later identified several factors that aligned with eerie precision. 1. The fuselage section created drag. It didn't fall like a rock. It fell like a loose, broken capsule, twisting, slowing, snagging pockets of air. Not enough to make the fall survivable, unless combined with other unlikely elements. 2. Trees absorbed part of the impact. The fragment crashed into a dense forest. Tall pines bent, snapped, and cushioned the descent, each one absorbing a slice of kinetic energy. 3. Snow softened the final blow. A thick layer of fresh snow meters deep blanketed the forest floor. Effectively, the ground acted like a massive natural airbag, for Vesna's body was pinned and protected. Being trapped by the mule cart created a rigid frame around her. Instead of being thrown around, her body remained fixed in a smaller volume of space within the fuselage. 5. She was unconscious. Her muscles were relaxed. Her body followed the motion instead of resisting it. This reduces internal tearing and extreme fractures. It was a perfect storm of survival, a combination so improbable that scientists still reference her case as one of the most extreme survivals in history. The final seconds, the plummeting wreckage smashed through the treetops with a violent crack, losing speed with every trunk it demolished. Branches ripped into metal, snow erupted upward, and then impact. A thunderous collision that should have killed anyone inside. But in the middle of the crushed metal, half buried in snow, there was movement. A faint breath, a pulse. The only living soul from flight JAT 367, still trapped, broken, bleeding, but alive. Dawn was just beginning to break over the mountains of Czechoslovakia when a group of villagers from Asarbiske Kamenis set out into the forest. They had heard an explosion during the night, a deep, rolling sound that didn't belong to winter storms or hunting rifles. No one knew what it was, but the elders insisted something had fallen from the sky. The forest was silent, unnaturally silent. Then they saw it, pieces of metal scattered across the snow, seat cushions hanging from broken trees, a thick trail of debris carving a path through the pines. The villagers quickened their pace, and then one of them, Bruno Honk, a former World War II medic, heard it, a sound so faint he thought it was the wind. A groan. He ran toward the noise and found a section of fuselage half buried in snow, crushed like a giant hand had folded it in on itself. He knelt, listening again. Another weak moan. Someone was alive inside. He shouted for help. "There's a woman here, she's still breathing." Together, the villagers pried open the twisted metal. What they found inside didn't seem possible. There, pinned under a smashed mule cart and tangled seatbelts, lay Vesna Vulović, unconscious, barely recognizable, her uniform soaked in blood. Her injuries were catastrophic. A fractured skull, 3 crushed vertebrae, including one that left her partially paralyzed. Both legs, broken ribs, shattered pelvis, fractured deep cuts, and internal bleeding, and yet her chest rose and fell. She was alive. Bruno Honk checked her pulse, stunned. He had seen countless soldiers die from far less. There was no medical explanation, no logical reason. She should have been gone long before anyone reached her, but Vesna had defied every law of physics and survival. First aid in a frozen forest, working with nothing more than instinct and wartime experience. Bruno stabilized her as best he could. He cleared her airway, immobilized her neck to protect her fractured spine, wrapped her in coats and blankets to fight hypothermia, applied pressure to stop the bleeding, kept her awake with gentle voice prompts when she drifted in and out of consciousness. The villagers fashioned a makeshift stretcher from branches and coats, carrying her carefully through the snow until emergency teams arrived hours later. She was rushed to a hospital, barely clinging to life. Doctors later admitted she arrived in a condition no human should survive. And yet, she did. Her survival wasn't just improbable, it was one of the greatest medical miracles ever recorded. When the ambulance finally reached the hospital in Prague, the medical staff assumed they were receiving a body. No one survives a fall from cruising altitude. No one arrives alive after a mid-air explosion. No one should, but when they opened the stretcher and saw a faint rise in her chest, the emergency team froze. She was still breathing. They rushed her into the trauma unit, calling in every available specialist. Nurses cut away what remained of her flight attendant uniform. Doctors shouted numbers, injuries, blood levels. It was chaos, but beneath the noise was disbelief. Because each new diagnostic result made the situation more impossible. A catalog of devastating injuries scans revealed what Vesna had endured. A fractured skull, 2 deep brain hemorrhages, spine shattered in several places, including a crushed lumbar vertebra, broken legs, fractured pelvis, cracked ribs, severe internal bleeding, and organ trauma, dozens of lacerations and contusions. Any one of these could have been fatal. Combined, they should have been One surgeon later admitted, "When we saw the scans, we prepared for the worst. There was simply no medical pathway for recovery. They expected her to die within the hour." But Vesna refused to die, and then something unexplainable happened. Her vital signs stabilized. Slightly, then a little more. Then enough for doctors to stop predicting her death and begin planning her treatment. Over the first 48 hours, she drifted in and out of consciousness, her memory erased, her body broken but her life stubbornly intact. Each day brought a shock, her brain swelling reduced. She regained partial sensation in her legs. Her spine responded to surgery better than anticipated. Infection never developed, even with such massive trauma. Her resilience forced the medical team to reconsider everything they thought they knew about survivability. Doctors began to say quietly, almost reluctantly, she should not be here, but she is. Weeks later, Vesna woke fully aware, speaking, asking what had happened. And when she learned the truth, even she said, "I don't know why I survived. I just did." Her recovery was not just remarkable, it was unprecedented in the history of aviation accidents. To this day, Vesna Vulovic's survival remains one of the most extraordinary events in aviation history. A fall from 33,000 feet should have left no survivors, yet she lived. While many call it a miracle, scientists, investigators, and aviation experts have spent decades examining how such an impossible event could happen. And the truth is this: Vesna survived because a unique combination of technical, physical, and environmental factors aligned in a way so rare it borders on the unbelievable. Let's break down the science behind her survival. 1. Cabin pressure. The first key factor when JAT Flight 367 exploded. The sudden decompression should have killed everyone on board instantly. But multiple reports suggest Vesna may have been in an area of the aircraft that did not fully depressurize, or depressurize slightly later than the rest of the plane. Why does this matter? A slower pressure drop reduces the risk of immediate death. Her section may have remained partially intact, allowing her to stay conscious or at least alive long enough for the fall. Investigators later noted that the chunk of fuselage she remained strapped into held together better than others, providing a protective shell during the descent. 2. The fuselage impacted snow. Not hard ground. If the wreckage had hit rock, frozen soil, or forest, Vesna would have died instantly. But fate placed her falling section directly over a steep, forested mountain slope covered in deep, soft snow. The snow acted like a natural crash pad. It absorbed a portion of the impact energy. It reduced deceleration forces on her body. It slowed the fuselage's velocity in the final seconds. Essentially, the snow turned a catastrophic crash into a less lethal, once still horrific, but not instantly fatal. 3. The position of her body. Seatbelt plus confinement. Vesna was strapped into her jump seat, located at the back of the aircraft's cabin. This did 2 critical things. Her body stayed aligned rather than being thrown around during the explosion. The section of fuselage around her formed a protective capsule, concentrating force on the structure rather than her spine or skull. In extreme trauma science, this is sometimes called the survival pocket effect. More importantly, her legs were tucked. Her torso was supported. She didn't experience multiple impacts, only one, catastrophic but singular. And sometimes, one impact is survivable where several are not. For the tree line slowed the descent, witnesses and investigators noted that the fuselage struck dense trees before reaching the ground. These trees broke the fall, reduced momentum, distributed the impact across the fuselage rather than directly into her body. Think of it like a massive natural braking system. 5. Statistically, she should have died. The probability of survival: a fall from 10,000 feet is considered fatal. A fall from 15,000 feet is guaranteed fatal. A fall from 33,000 feet is beyond the limits of human survivability. Experts estimate the mathematical probability of surviving such an event is less than 1 in 100 million. Some argue it's closer to 1 in a billion. Even if every factor is favorable: partial fuselage integrity, slowed descent, deep snow impact, protected body position, immediate rescue, the odds remain astronomically low. And yet Vesna lived. So why did she survive when no one else did? Because in this one moment, environment, physics, chance, body positioning, terrain, weather, and even luck all aligned perfectly. In aviation history, no other case fully matches the combination of factors that saved Vesna Vulović. Her survival isn't just rare, it's scientifically unprecedented. If Vesna Vulovic's survival is extraordinary, the story around it is even more mysterious. For decades, the official explanation of what happened to Flight JAT 367 has been challenged by independent investigators, journalists, and even intelligence agencies. What should have been a clear aviation tragedy instead became a maze of conflicting claims, political tensions, and unanswered questions. Here is the chapter that exposes the hidden truth behind the crash, the theories that emerged, and why so much remains unclear. 1. The official theory: a terrorist bomb. According to the Yugoslav government and initial investigations, a briefcase bomb planted in the front baggage area exploded mid-flight. The device was allegedly placed by a Croatian nationalist extremist group. The explosion tore the aircraft apart. This explanation was widely accepted at the time because similar attacks had occurred during that era. Yugoslavia was politically fragile. Blaming an external group avoided internal political consequences. For years, the official report was considered final, but then everything changed. To the Czech conspiracy, there was no bomb. In 2009, 2 Czech investigative journalists revisited the case and published a shocking claim: the plane may not have exploded at 33,000 feet at all. Their theory argued, Flight JAT 367 was accidentally shot down at low altitude by Czechoslovak air defenses. The breakup happened closer to the ground, not in the upper atmosphere. The bomb story was an invention to avoid diplomatic conflict during the Cold War. They supported their theory with declassified documents, radar logs, testimonies of Czech military personnel, inconsistencies in the flight's reported altitude according to them. The government chose a politically convenient explanation: a bomb was never proven. This caused a massive global controversy. 3. The missing evidence problem. One of the biggest reasons doubts persisted was simple: no explosive residue was ever conclusively found. Investigators never recovered bomb fragments, traces of chemical explosives, ignition components. This doesn't disprove an explosion, but it weakens the official version and fuels alternative theories. 4. Why would governments hide the truth? The Cold War created a political environment where even small mistakes could escalate into major international crises. Here's what some researchers claim: if the plane was mistakenly shot down by a Warsaw Pact missile, admitting it would have caused a diplomatic and political earthquake. If the aircraft crashed due to pilot error or mechanical failure, it would harm Yugoslav national pride and aviation credibility. A terrorist bomb was the most convenient narrative. No state blamed, no military embarrassment, no need for geopolitical tension. In other words, the bomb theory may have been politically safer than the truth. 5. Hidden files and classified evidence. Investigators and journalists have repeatedly requested access to government and intelligence archives. They discovered some documents remain sealed. Flight logs contradict publicly released timelines, witness testimonies were altered or ignored. Several aviation experts argue we still do not have a complete reconstruction of the final minutes of the flight. In a world where most air disasters are documented in detail, Flight JAT 367 stands out for its lack of transparent data. 6. What about Vesna's own memory? Vesna Vulović suffered massive head trauma. She has no memory of the explosion, the fall, the rescue. Her testimony was limited. Some say she was used as a symbol of Yugoslav resilience. Even she later admitted, "I don't remember anything, only what they told me." This absence of personal recollection makes the truth even harder to verify. 7. Why do so many questions remain unanswered? Even today, 50+ years later, the case still raises troubling mysteries. Why were key documents never released? Why was no bomb residue ever confirmed? Why do impact reports contradict the stated altitude? Why did the official investigation conclude so quickly? Why do independent analyses show structural breakup typical of low altitude disintegration, not a high altitude bomb? Experts agree on one thing: we may never know what truly happened over Czechoslovakia that day. 8. The one truth no one disputes, regardless of the cause: bomb missile, mechanical failure, or something else. The fact remains: Vesna Vulović survived an event no human should have survived. Her fall remains the highest non-parachute fall in history. Her survival is undisputed. The cause of the crash is not. When Vesna Vulović woke up in the hospital, she had no idea she had survived one of the most extraordinary events in human history. She didn't know about the fall, the explosion, or the countless theories circulating around the world. She didn't even know why global newspapers were suddenly writing about her. All she knew was that she was alive. Against every possible odd, awakening to a new life, Vesna spent days drifting in and out of consciousness. Her injuries were severe. Multiple fractures, a crushed pelvis, broken legs, 3 broken vertebrae, a skull fracture, temporary paralysis. But what doctors found even more astonishing was her resilience. Despite the trauma, she gradually regained movement, speech, and awareness. She asked simple questions. She tried to stand long before she was ready. She fought through pain without hesitation. It didn't take long before doctors realized, this woman is not just surviving, she is fighting her way back. To a global media phenomenon, as Vesna recovered, her story spread across Europe, then across the world. Newspapers called her the miracle survivor, the woman who fell from the sky, the unbreakable hostess. Her survival was so extraordinary that even journalists thought it was a hoax until doctors confirmed everything: her fall, her injuries, her recovery. Television crews showed up at the hospital. International reporters lined up to interview her. Her story became a symbol of hope during a time of political chaos. She didn't seek fame, but fame found her. 3. The Guinness World Record that still stands in 1972. Guinness World Records awarded her a certificate for the highest fall survived without a parachute, 10,160 meters, 33,330 feet. This record remains unbroken as of today. For decades, Vesna became a recurring reference whenever scientists discussed extreme survival, limits of human physiology, or miracles beyond explanation. She often said, "I don't feel like a record holder. I feel lucky to be alive." For trauma behind the smile, despite the world calling her a miracle, Vesna carried deep emotional wounds. She struggled with severe PTSD nightmares, flashbacks she could not fully understand, guilt for being the only survivor, physical pain that lasted decades. She rarely liked talking about the crash. Whenever journalists tried to push for details, she avoided the topic gently but firmly. Her memory of the crash was gone, erased by trauma. Some would say that was both a blessing and a curse. 5. A life of quiet resilience. Instead of capitalizing on her fame, Vesna chose a humble path. She returned to work not as a flight attendant, but in a desk role for JAT Airlines. She helped passengers, handled paperwork, and tried to build a normal life. Later, she became politically active. She advocated for peace, she opposed violence, she supported democratic movements in Serbia. People saw her as a national heroine not because she survived a fall from the sky, but because she refused to become bitter. She turned trauma into purpose. Journalists who met her described her as soft-spoken, kind, and surprisingly cheerful for someone who lived the unlivable. 6. The weight of a miracle. Even decades after the crash, she remained uncomfortable with the miracle label. She often insisted, "Others died that day. I don't want to be celebrated for surviving." She lived with a deep sense of responsibility. She felt she had to honor the victims by living a decent, compassionate life, and she did. Her survival wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. She became a symbol of endurance, humility, and the unpredictable strength of the human body and mind. 7. Her legacy today. When Vesna passed away in 2016, tributes came from all over the world. Pilots, doctors, aviation historians, survival experts, human rights activists. Her story remains a cornerstone in discussions about survival against impossible odds. Today, we remember her not just as the woman who survived a fall from the sky, but as the woman who rebuilt her life afterward, with dignity and courage. Vesna Vulovic's survival wasn't just an aviation incident. It became a phenomenon, one that traveled far beyond the borders of Yugoslavia, beyond Europe, and into the collective memory of the entire world. What happened to her defied physics, challenged medical science, and forced people to question their understanding of fate, luck, and human resilience. In the years following the crash, Vesna evolved from a young flight attendant into something much greater, a global symbol of endurance. At a time when Europe was divided by political tensions, suspicion, and the lingering shadows of war, her story offered something people desperately needed: hope. Her survival echoed across continents. Newspapers in Asia called her the indestructible woman. American doctors studied her case, astonished that a fall from 33,000 feet could end in life instead of tragedy. In Europe, she became a reminder that even in moments of destruction, the human spirit could break every rule and rise again. But what truly captivated the world wasn't just the miracle itself. It was Vesna. She didn't turn her survival into spectacle. She didn't claim divine intervention, nor did she call herself brave. She simply said, "I'm happy to be alive." Others were not so lucky. That humility is what transformed her into an icon. To many, Vesna symbolized the strength hidden inside ordinary people, the kind of strength that only reveals itself in the worst moments of life. She became a living example that survival isn't just about the body, but the will. In Eastern Europe, she became a cultural figure, appearing in songs, poems, and documentaries. Generations grew up hearing her story as proof that miracles can happen in the most unlikely places. In the West, she was cited in medical journals, aviation safety reports, and psychology studies on extreme trauma. But no matter how many people studied her case, the message remained universal. Human beings are capable of far more than they think. Her recovery, her refusal to seek fame, and the grace with which she carried the weight of her survival made her a symbol not of tragedy, but of triumph. She reminded the world that sometimes, survival isn't an accident, it's a fight she refused to lose. Even decades later, her name still represents the extraordinary potential of the human spirit. Vesna Vulović didn't choose to become a symbol, but she became one, nevertheless, an enduring icon of resilience, courage, and the mysteries that still exist at the edge of human possibility. In the end, Vesna Vulovic's story is not just the tale of a miraculous fall, it is the story of what it means to be human, fragile, unpredictable, yet capable of surviving the impossible. Her survival challenges everything we think we know about physics, medicine, and fate. It raises questions that experts still debate today. But beyond the mystery, beyond the theories and the controversies, one truth remains. Sometimes, life chooses you. Sometimes, you rise because something deep inside refuses to let go. Vesna's fall from 33,000 feet is a reminder that existence itself is precarious, that everything can change in a single second, and yet even in that second, there can be hope. Her story forces us to confront our own lives. The battles we face, the moments we think we cannot overcome, the days when everything feels stacked against us. And it tells us this: if Vesna could survive that, maybe we can survive this. She became a symbol not because she wanted to, but because her story speaks to something universal, a truth about resilience, luck, and the thin line that separates tragedy from miracle. Her life after the crash wasn't perfect. She carried trauma, physical pain, and unanswered questions. But she kept going. She lived. She fought. And that is the true miracle. In a world that often feels heavy, chaotic, or unfair, her story reminds us that the human spirit is stronger than we think, stronger than facts, stronger than fate. Maybe that is why we still talk about Vesna Vulović today, because her survival is not just an anomaly, it is a message. A message that no matter how far we fall, there is always a chance to rise again. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you question the limits of what's possible, don't let it end here. Like, comment, and share this video so that others can discover the unbelievable story of Vesna Vulović. Subscribe for more true stories that challenge what we know about survival, resilience, and the human spirit. Because some stories aren't just meant to be heard, they're meant to be remembered.